Breathe in, breathe out. Let's go.
I'm pretty sure we're sort of live. People are joining.
Still connecting.
Last sip of coffee for Steve. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the third and final session of the SDG Innovation Roadshow for today. With us, we have Steve Melhuis, founder of Property Guru, partner at Wavemaker Impact and Planet Rise. He is going to have a lot of stuff to share that you all want to know about. Steve, thank you very much for joining us today. It's super exciting to have a successful entrepreneur who's also very active in the sustainability space join our first event. I assume that everybody spent 3 hours already reading up on you on the internet, but for the few people who didn't, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Melhuis. You've done it already. I'm the co-founder of Property Guru, which is an online real estate company used by 40 million people every month across Southeast Asia. We took the company public on the New York Stock Exchange recently. And for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been focusing heavily on climate and social impact, investing in and helping startups in that space.
Okay. So I've been reading up on you to prepare for this session. So I read basically in 2007, you had some frustrations about the real estate market. You wanted to do something about that. That's now 15 years ago. There's been a lot of time in between. But what happened when you came up with your idea to do something about how this market was working?
Yeah, for me, it was very much, as you said, it was around personal frustration, and actually many startups I talk to these days, quite a big part of starting businesses is around that. And so for me, I was renting a property in Singapore, and it was the height of a hot property market, and I had to move out of the property very quickly. And I'd recently arrived in Singapore, 18 months or 2 years before that, so the first thing I did was to go online, because in Europe everything was online, and to my surprise, the real estate wasn't online, and I then had to go through this hellish process of wading through 3 or 4 inches thick of newspapers, which is kind of how things were done 20, 30, 40 years ago in many countries, but in Singapore that was how classifieds were done. And it was a hugely frustrating process, because it was just 3 lines of text. Villa Marina, telephone number, and if you're trying to find your home, that's just not enough. But obviously, if you could be buying a property, then and spending $500,000 or $1 million in Singapore is how much they cost, and you don't have any information at your fingertips, it's a stressful process anyway finding a home. But if you've got no information at all, and you're going to make the single biggest investment of your life without any information, and you're basically outsourcing all of the process to a real estate agent maybe who's trying to sell you something, or a property developer who's trying to sell you something, or talk to friends and family who perhaps don't know about the real estate market. You're out of control. So what we tried to do was to set out to empower the consumer and put information back in their hands, enable the consumer to make a more confident property decision. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea. It was on the face of it, maybe Singapore was a small market, at that stage 4.5 million population. But actually, what I did when I researched it when I first started, saw that it was about $50 billion of transactions every year in the market, $250 billion across the whole of Southeast Asia. Growing because of population growth and urbanization, middle class affluence growing. And also the start in those days of internet adoption. So you had, internet banking starting. You had, e-commerce in the form of a company called eBay. For some of you remember eBay in those days. And so some early stages of internet adoption. So and at that stage, around the world, Japan, China, France, Germany, UK, US, these online real estate businesses had been around already for about 7 or 8 years and were, 60, 70, 80% net profit, very cash generative businesses for the market leader. So the business model seemed to kind of translate all these markets. The market opportunities seemed huge, And my biggest concern really was, okay, it's so obvious, then it was, why is no one doing this? Regardless, that's kind of how we started. And, it was a fairly monumentous task because, everything was offline in those days, right? You had, it was in the print or a little bit on TV. All of the real estate agents, all of the real estate developers, all of the consumers were wading through the newspapers. And we come along with this kind of new idea to do things on the internet. And so it was a monumental task fighting two, billion-dollar, monopolies essentially in this space. And we had no cash, no team, no office, for some stupid reason we thought we'd
so much fun.
some unwavering self-belief that we were crazy enough to be able to make a difference and translate this into what was going on here. It was we bootstrapped it for the first 5 years pretty much, and worked 7 days a week and didn't take a salary, didn't take a vacation, and just kept innovating. And as you can imagine, the first MVP was pretty crappy. No photographs still. We had listings for sale when they should have been for rent. We had 5 million when it should have been 500,000. It was a bit messy. But what we hadn't realized is that the population was growing, and a lot of the population was growing because foreigners were coming in from China, from Australia, from the US into Singapore, because the population went from 4.5 to 5.5 million. And so expats coming in had a budget, and they started researching online from their home country, and all they found was property gurus. So that was how we kind of first got started.
So it sounds a little bit like how I came to Singapore. Probably Property Guru was one of the first websites I ever visited moving here.
Well, it's the only one you ever visit these days, right?
I haven't been moving around much lately, so I haven't been looking at homes or stuff like that. So, but don't worry, I'll get back. So like you already said, like at the start, the market was already captured in a very different way by competitors that were doing things totally offline. I assume you've come across quite a lot of pivotal moments that could have made or break Property Guru. Can you maybe share 1 or 2 minutes from that entire journey that you think, okay, if we would have gone this way, we would never have gotten to the stage where we are at now, and if we would have gone that way, then, well, obviously that's where how you became successful.
I think so that kind of came about. I think the major decision, I guess, came about after about 4 years. We built this. We were cash flow positive and profitable after about 3 years, and we were growing about 3 or 4x a year, and we built a strong position in Singapore. So then the obvious thing was, okay, now what do you do? And so we had 2 choices at that point. One was to go, okay, we could add jobs, cars, general classifieds next to this property business in Singapore and focus on Singapore. Or we could say, let's do real estate and let's do it across Southeast Asia. And after a lot of analysis and discussion with our investors, we kind of decided, let's go international. And that was, I think that was the right decision to do, because there are some similarities in terms of what people do from a real estate point of view across multiple markets. And again, it may seem obvious now, but at that time we didn't, we were thinking about both things. So that was a pivotal decision that we made. But if you think about, for any entrepreneur who's building a business, there's not a rule book for how you build your business in your country. There wasn't a rule book for how we go build an online real estate company in Singapore or Southeast Asia. And we were making up the rules the whole time. And we were led by this healthy paranoia, or maybe unhealthy paranoia, that actually, if we didn't keep moving fast and innovating really fast and keep expanding really fast, we would lose the opportunity, because what's the barrier to entry? It's just a website, right? And that was our worry, and that anyone could come along. And we were seeing people posting, clone the Property Guru's website. We want to clone the Property Guru Singapore website. And so we were really worried that competition was going to steal the opportunity from us unless we ran. So we went from one market, which was built in 4 years, to 4 markets in 4 months. And that was just a ridiculous mistake. And we were so naive in that. approach. We just thought we could just, very arrogant if you think about it, just cut and paste the Singapore business and roll it out across the rest of Southeast Asia. But of course, every market is very, very different. The types of properties people look for, consumer behavior, the real estate market is very different. And so we almost killed the company by doing this, because all of the organization was focused on Singapore. Singapore product, tech, innovation, customer services, finance. And then we said, okay, we're now adding, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, multiple platforms, mobile apps for the consumers in iOS and Android, the website in Bahasa and also Thai. And so, we hired 200 people, we lost 200 people. We had a country manager in Thailand who was an alcoholic. We had a country manager in Malaysia who was taking the marketing budget and giving it to his wife, who was, the marketing agency. We had a country manager in Indonesia who was working for 2 companies at the same time. We were taking people from Singapore to work on the rest of the business outside of Singapore. And of course, then Singapore slowed down. All this innovation that was taking place in Singapore, ground to a halt because they were fixing bugs and trying to do stuff in other markets. The big learning on that was, just to walk and not run. And if we'd just gone from one market to then choosing the next market and doing that in a very systematic way, we wouldn't have been any worse off. We would have been a lot less stressed. So we spent 2 years pretty much fixing that mess. So that was probably the most pivotal time, I'd say, and also one of the biggest, I think, challenges or mistakes that we made in building the business.
I'm curious actually to follow up on that, because you're now on the investor side of things.
Yeah.
And you're probably telling all these same points to new entrepreneurs that are in the stages that you were back then in. I think it's very common that entrepreneurs feel that pressure, especially from investors, to go faster, grow the company. What do you tell them nowadays based on your own experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna vary case by case, but and it's also going to vary a little bit. It's a B2C company versus a B2B company. If you're a B2B company servicing the construction industry or manufacturing or education, some of those elements will translate across borders a lot easier. So maybe B2B businesses are a little bit more scalable across multiple markets if you're focused on a particular industry. Consumer businesses are a lot more challenging to focus. And so I would rather be an investor in a company which is really strong and dominates one market, rather than a company which is spread super thin across 20 markets or 10 markets, and is burning cash and doesn't have the depth underneath in terms of customer engagement and really adding value and helping the customers. And so, normally what I advise is to be very, very systematic and careful about when you expand. If you're at like 1% market share of your core market in Singapore or Indonesia, wherever it might be, then it's gonna be a lot easier to grow that 1% to 10%, for example, in your home market, rather than expanding to 5 new markets. Because you're gonna have to learn a lot of the things again, because the culture is different, the hiring practices are different, the market structure is going to be different, and challenges are going to be very, very different, and you're going to be spending every week in those markets. So what happens to your core market while you're doing that? So I like to build long-term sustainable companies, particularly now where you've got the start of maybe a little bit of a cooling patch in terms of funding. Back to fundamentals, back to strong unit economics, back to sustainable growth, not burning millions of dollars of cash every single month. I think it's what we're going to start to see now. So being a little bit more cautious about what the next sort of 12 to 18 months looks like. So even more so now.
Yeah. I like to start opening up the floor also for questions. So if anyone if anyone has a question, start putting them in the Q&A. You have a different Q&A than me at the moment. So, and also, Andre, we're going to put you on screen with the people in the room in a minute. So if you can start collecting the questions that are here on location.
Yeah.
While we do that, one more question from my side for the moment. So Property Guru just went public in the US. A couple of years ago, you actually already had somebody else take over as CEO of the company. Those are I assume as an entrepreneur and when you've built something from scratch, like to very huge moments for you when building your business, especially handing over as a CEO to somebody else. How was that for you to actually have to trust somebody with basically sort of your business baby?
Yeah. No, it's a really, really good question. I think so. A little bit of context. So, you know, I'm an old dad, and it took a long time for my kids to come along. We went through a whole bunch of fertility treatment process trying to have my kids, and eventually they arrived probably 10 years later than they should have done. And I was right in the middle of building Probably Good as we're expanding from one market to multiple markets. And so the kids were 3, and I woke up one day and I got really, really worried that actually, because I'm working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, I'm going to miss seeing these kids grow up if I don't do something about it. So for me, that was a big catalyst to think a little bit about, okay, what's my succession plan? How do I start to exit out of it? And of course, in theory, all good leaders should be thinking about succession. And so we managed to persuade the board that was a good thing to do. And it was a kind of a 3-year process where we kind of had to diversify the company and get that. And
oh shit!
Oh, are you all right?
Sorry, everyone. Yeah, I'm okay. The camera is.
All right. Okay. I was just camera. Okay. I thought it was you falling over. Okay. Yeah, and so for me it was about trying to spend a bit more time with the family, and so we went through a succession plan process, diversifying.
Oh, that's the microphone. I'm sorry. Right, you're okay.
Still really accurate.
Yeah, I've muted him already.
That's it. You've done it.
That's why so I can take over control again. What's happening?
Yeah, no, it was it was a hard decision, but I think ultimately I wanted to see my kids grow up, and I didn't want to get them to like 11 or 12, and I missed seeing them grow up, and so then that wasn't really consistent. I'm a little bit of a workaholic. I was working 7 days a week, and that's not consistent with being a great dad, and I didn't want to I don't want to miss out on that. So we persuaded the board that it made sense to do this, and they were initially a bit worried, but they said, look, let's put a plan in place, and we put a plan in place to diversify the revenues. At that stage, 95% of the revenues were in Singapore, as we want to diversify, so it's across the rest of the 4 markets, and also then revenues from other streams like from the banks and the property developers, and then build a leadership team. The leadership team was still fairly embryonic at that point. The C-levels and middle managers, and then lastly to hire the CEO. And so
that's your end.
I just got hit by lightning.
Everyone in Asia.
Again, okay. The end of the world is coming. The end of the world is coming. So I went through that process, and I interviewed and sat down with a whole bunch of founders who'd gone through similar processes, and they told me about, look, it's a tough process, letting go, sense of purpose, and lack of confidence, and depression, and this kind of thing, and I kind of sort of listened to them, but I didn't really accept it. And I went through the same thing, and I found it very, very challenging. It's like kind of head versus heart, and in the middle of the process, my wife was saying, look, you're the only happiest I've ever known you. If you want to take the CEO back, just take it back. And do you want it? And I said, no. It was an emphatic no, I didn't want it, because I made the commitment. I wanted to spend time with my kids. But it was a challenging process, and I underestimated how hard it would be for a founder to let go. My co-founder was fine about it, but I wasn't. I guess I'm a little bit more emotional than maybe he is. I also discovered I had an ego. I actually discovered I quite enjoyed managing the leadership team meetings, the town halls, and then the media interviews. I didn't think I was like that, but I actually discovered I was like that. So it was a good learning process, yeah, challenging for a founder to go through a process. Particularly, as a self-inflicted, I decided to do this, and yeah, so I have to keep bringing myself back to that. So why am I doing this? It's to spend more time with my kids ultimately. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to get more into your sustainability activities that you're working on right now, because you've made quite a career shift, as far as I can tell, in terms of what you're now doing on a day-to-day basis with Wavemaker Impact and Planet Rise. Can you share a little bit about what it is that you're exactly working on nowadays, and also why, for you personally, you made that shift?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the first question, your second question first, I think, why did I make that shift? Wow, it's really, really bad weather here.
You have zero control over that.
Yeah, I know. In 2018, when I started to spend a bit more time with the kids, I was also thinking about what do I do next as well. And in 2018, the climate drum was beating very, very loudly. It seemed like everywhere I looked, it was like weather records like this were being broken. Extreme weather. It's like $300 billion of extreme weather damage caused in 2018, which was a record in those years, and it's been broken probably 3 or 4 times since. Record temperatures been broken ever since. And it looked like it was getting faster and faster and faster. And the more I researched it, the more I got worried and scared for my kids and their kids' generation in terms of what the world's going to look like for them in the future. And all the stuff that I've been taking for granted, when I was growing up, whether it was, swimming in oceans or, walking through forests and seeing wildlife or, skiing or whatever, that might not be there for the kids in the future, and their world will look very, very different. And I started the research, and I got completely overwhelmed. Firstly, because it's such a complex subject, and there's a lot of science involved. But I also started thinking, well, how can I play a role? And how can I play a role is I know how to build businesses. I've been doing it for 25 years. I know how to build startups. And I've been angel investing for 20 years. And so I shifted all of my angel investing in 2018 to focus on climate and social impact. So I have a portfolio of 20 companies which are in the climate and social impact space. And I work with those, and I help the founders with some of those companies. And then I also realized that, to scale that and have a really big impact on a global basis, on a bigger basis, I can't just do it on my own. And so that led to conversations with some people who are like-minded, who are building climate tech businesses in ENGIE, one of the renewable energy companies in the region. Another entrepreneur who had built an autonomous driving vehicle who was investing in clean tech, and also Wavemaker, one of the leading VCs in the region, and a managing partner for that. So 5 partners came together to tackle carbon emissions in Southeast Asia, and the objective is to reduce emissions by 50% in the next 10 years. So how do we make that happen? We make that happen by not inventing new technology or science or R&D. It's taking existing technology and adapting it to a particular problem and a particular use case, and working with experienced entrepreneurs to build, hopefully, climate tech unicorns in Southeast Asia over the next, 5 to 10 years. And the ultimate game is to, reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally by 10%, which is a big, ambitious task. And we need to build 50 companies which are each mitigating 100 megatons of emissions doing that. And we have to be doing it quickly. So these companies need to be in the market in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, growing from 1 farmer to 1 million farmers, from 1 factory to 100,000 factories. So fast adoption, venture grade companies are going to be key to doing that. And that's what keeps me awake. How do we scale these businesses fast so they can have a really big impact on emissions?
Thank you. I wanted to go to the questions that we have so far. I first really like to go to Andre. Everyone in that room, please turn off your sound so we don't get the echo back again. Andre, oh sorry, now I've removed you from the stage. Sorry, it's a little bit. Andre, can you unmute yourself? And if there's any questions in the room, please ask them. Andre, do you hear us? Okay, we're going to Jahong first, and then we come back to Andre. So we have a question from Jahong. What for you are the most interesting areas in the climate space? Software versus hardware solutions? Get as specific as you like, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so I think the first thing to say is, in terms of building solutions, you need to be thinking about, where the emissions are. And for us, what we realized was actually that no one had really kind of mapped where the emissions were in Southeast Asia. So that was the first thing we had to do. And then what we realized was actually, only 2% of the total climate tech investing globally is going into Southeast Asia. So it's a very small percentage. But of that small percentage, almost 70% was going into EVs and electric vehicles. Whereas you stand back and look at where the emissions are, 50% is food, agri, land use. 40% is industrial, manufacturing and building construction. So the challenge is, the money and the entrepreneurs are focused on the wrong thing. So we're focused on solving problems in where the emissions are. Now, if that solution involves software, great, because it's scalable. If it involves some part of hardware, that may also happen. And in many cases, the climate tech companies we're working with have an element of hardware, but this is not rocket science or science-based hardware. This is, a solar panel on top of an irrigation pump, commodity, essentially. How do you roll that out to replace diesel pumps for 18 million farmers across Southeast Asia? How do you reduce energy consumption for a factory using some AI, machine learning, and IoT hardware, for example, in a factory? So, most of the companies will have an element of hardware and software, but not rocket science. Because if we're going to shift emissions by 50%, reduce by 50% in the next 10 years or less, then we have to have mass adoption fast. And so that's how we're approaching it. So we're investing in building companies which are, software and hardware.
The mix. Andre, can you unmute yourself and tell us if there's any questions with you in the room?
Just scoping out the room. Any questions from anyone? Okay, there's one at the back, but I'll type it out.
Okay, we're gonna get that typed out by Andre in a second. In the meantime, I will go to a question by you. Steve, can you share any big contrast you are seeing between climate tech versus other industries in terms of challenges in building a climate tech startup?
Yeah. So having been in this space, I think there's probably, for the last 4 years, there's probably 3 key areas, I think. So I think one is it's such a broad, complex subject, and there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of science involved, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed very quickly, whether you are a founder or whether you are, someone like a corporate potential customer or, SME. So it's a complex subject. I think it's the first thing to say. The second thing is that the founders I meet are super passionate about sustainability. They're super passionate trying to solve climate change. But let's face it, unfortunately, customers don't give a shit about that or sustainability. They may be talking about it, but they're not acting yet on the whole. I mean, there are some exceptions, and I guess Amazon may be one of those, maybe. But on the whole, customers are not buying sustainability. What the customers want is revenue growth, more customers, they want productivity, they want cost reductions, they want margins. And one of the challenges that I find working with some of the founders in this space is that because they're so passionate about sustainability, they're so passionate about climate change, they talk a lot about it to customers. And in many cases, customers don't really care about it. But what they do care about is business challenges. And so, the way to approach it is around addressing business challenges rather than, which then leads to a climate impact. And then the third thing is, I think, there is equity investment around for climate tech for sure, and because companies that are growing fast, which just happen to be solving climate tech, will get funded. The challenge is, it relates a little bit to the previous question, is that in many cases or some cases there is an element of hardware, and it may take 1 month or 2 months or 3 months from the order to the hardware inventory being bought and then assembled and then shipped out, and therefore there's a working capital cash crunch. And in Southeast Asia, and I suspect the whole of Asia Pac, there is a gap. Equity financing from 250K or 25K up to $250 million, no problem. Venture capital, debt financing, working capital financing for like $1 million, $2 million up to sort of $20 million, there is a big, big gap. And many of the companies I work with, their single biggest challenge, other than maybe getting customers, is around that working capital money. There's no point raising $10 million equity investment to put into working capital because it's too expensive. It costs too much, and so raising debt, 10% per annum interest, 15% per annum interest. There's a big underserved gap, and it's one area which sort of keeps me awake at night. And if anybody has any recommendations in that space, I would love to talk to them. If I can't find anybody, then I guess we're going to have to go and build that and serve that problem ourselves.
I actually have a follow-up question based on this one. We're here for the AWS Innovation Roadshow that's focusing on health tech startups, government tech startups, and educational startups. One of the ideas behind the program is actually that most companies that are getting off the ground right now as a startup should probably focus on sustainability regardless. If they want to sustain for the future, just running their normal business. Now, for an existing business, that's obviously different. Like they really have to switch their model. But do you agree that like if you're now an entrepreneur coming up with something that kind of thinking about sustainably building your business, not purely from a profit perspective, but also from other stakeholder perspectives, is kind of a necessity?
Yes. So, I mean, as I said before, I think, not many companies today are going out of their way to buy a sustainable company or product or service or solution.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality, unfortunately. Now, it is changing and it's coming for sure, but that is the reality. However, if you think about where things are going in the future and what the early starts we're starting to see, then all companies in the future that survive will have to be sustainable because employees, increasingly, talent want to work for sustainable companies, and they will be choosing companies which are more sustainable that they want to work for. And from a startup point of view, talent is tough. You want that.
Yeah.
If you have a sustainable company, you open up a whole additional pool of investors. In Singapore and Southeast Asia, there's about 45 impact investors that I'm aware of. And if you don't have any kind of sustainability credentials at all, then that's gonna, you're gonna miss out on that pool of capital. And increasingly, banks and governments are, encouraging green finance, green loans, and so you're starting to see, finance. So you have access to more capital and maybe a lower cost of capital. And then increasingly, governments are putting regulations in place, which is making it more costly. So, for example, carbon tax will start to hit eventually. So companies will have to start to worry about this. And there's increasing investor pressure as well. So, it makes sense, if you're starting a business today, having an eye on sustainability. However, if your business is not totally focused around sustainability, but you want to build it with sustainability, it makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that, we've been doing at Wavemaker is something we call stage appropriate sustainability pledge. And what this means is that if you're you've got 3 staff in your startup, there's no point in having massive commitment to all these things you've been doing in terms of impact and sustainability and all the measurements you're going to be having to doing, and it's going to end up being the tail that wags the dog. It's just too much. But having a stage appropriate commitment to sustainability is something which I really like. And so you say, look, we're going to make a commitment next 5 years that we're going to go from one female leader to 25% of our team is going to be female leaders. How do you think about gender diversity inclusion? How do you think about carbon impact? Just making some very, very high level pledge that so as your business grows, you will start to do a little bit more in that space. And I think that kind of thing works for me. So it's like a baby step. I highly recommend that kind of approach with early stage startups.
Thank you very much. I'm very aware we're running over time, but there's been one final question that I think the answer can be pretty short. by Ellen that I want to pop on the stage. Hi, Steve. Are you also investing in rare mineral companies in the green tech space?
Today, no. And I guess it doesn't mean won't in the future. I think there's going to be a significant demand, obviously, particularly in relation to renewables and renewable energy and batteries for rare minerals. And I think that's going to drive additional, demand and sources of rare minerals. I guess the challenge is that, how is that mining conducted today in terms of treatment of workers? So you still see a lot of slave labor taking place in terms of mining, particularly, and also carbon intensity of actually extracting the rare minerals from the land. So the one area I have looked at is how you recycle rare minerals from existing hardware devices like mobile devices or batteries. And I think that's a really, really interesting area, because we can't just keep this never-ending growth and sucking more and more resources out of the land. It's just not sustainable. And so we have to start thinking more around circularity and circular economy in the world, and think about how we take the existing rare minerals that are there, and rather than just throwing it away, how do you then, in a sustainable way, extract that? And so that kind of business area I'm really, really excited about and interested in. And I have looked at a few businesses in that space.
Thank you very much. So because of the time, we unfortunately have to end this interview. Is there any final advice or comment or note that you want to make to the audience in your current role as an investor and a venture builder at Wavemaker Impact that we should all take away from today?
I'm sorry. Can you say it again? My Alexa went started speaking to me halfway through that, so you must have said to get my Alexa speaking.
If you have, why is everybody laughing at me over that? That's me, I guess. No, if you have any final advice or comments for all the founders and the people who are watching right now, building their businesses, that I could take away from today.
Yeah. No, I think for me. Well, first of all, it's hugely commendable that you're focusing on sustainability, and I want and encourage and will support more and more entrepreneurs who want to do something and address sustainability challenges. And so I really, really welcome and applaud what you're doing. I think enjoy the journey. I learned more as an entrepreneur than I did at any other time, and it's a really interesting process. And I think that the key for me, as being an entrepreneur, with 3 or 4 businesses I've built, it's around really, really focusing on the key pain point. Focus on the problem. And just keep obsessing around that one problem, and keep thinking about what insights can you get from your customers to solve their problem, because ultimately that will lead to you creating value for them and ultimately building a valuable business as well in the process. But yeah, good luck, and I look forward to seeing some future sustainability unicorns in this audience in the future.
For sure. Thank you very much, Steve, for being our closing speaker and keynote for today and for the first edition of the SDG Innovation Roadshow. It was really cool having you. I know after this session I need a camera with a longer cord. So we're learning a lot along the way as well. But thank you very much for joining, and with that we're gonna close off the session. Gina, yeah, sure. So like I was already saying, this is the same issue every time. Yes. So in a minute, we're going to go to the networking. I will explain that in a second. But before we go there,
yeah, sure. Well, inviting all of you guys to continue that journey. We're only getting started over here. So our next destination, our next stop will be South Korea. so in June. After which we will have another roadshow focused more on ASEAN countries. So think about like what we've covered today, the type of speakers will have a focus really on that region, right? Then Australia, New Zealand, and we'll end in Japan. So we look forward to more opportunities to engaging with like more founders and have more focused local conversation on the state of SDGs in all of those sub-regions. So invite you to start to register for the next sessions if you're interested to learn more about sustainability in other parts of Asia Pacific. Once again, calling all startups founders to apply for the AWS Startup Grant Program and as well for AWS Head Start. So you see here the QR code that you can flash, the program codes as well that will route you to the right programs. We'll make sure that your applications are screened very quickly, and then that we onboard you into our programs very rapidly as well and deliver our benefits as quickly as possible. We really look forward to receiving your applications and have you join our family. I think, yeah, that's a...
Yeah, and to add on to that, the dates for the events that you were seeing earlier, they're moving a little bit. So basically for the latest dates, Oceania is actually not in July, it's going to be in September. So sorry for the wrong slide. But all the correct dates are going to be on the event website. So just check there. Also, when you register, it will automatically update.
So for all of those who are in the AWS office, stay with us. In the adjacent training room to your right side, we're going to continue with globalization partners. So you can start to move over there for those who want to stay for lunch and learn sessions on human capital sustainability and for more networking in person with myself, Robin, and Gina.
And with that, we want to close off the first SDG Innovation Roadshow APAC. But before we do that, you've seen the three of us most of the time. So Camille and Gina, thank you very much for today. I hope you liked our presentation skills. If you didn't, let us know. But there's also been a lot of other people helping out for today that I'd like to mention. So like I've been saying, there's a room over there that you cannot see, but we'll post it on social media so you can check it. So Andre, Clara, and Sam, thank you very much for helping everybody over there. Desmond, of course, also. And then online, on the back end, there's been quite a lot of people that have been helping you on the chat. So that would be my team. So Darvis, Pai, and most of all, Rishav, I know I've stressed you out for a lot this today and the past month. Really nice job. And then finally, of course, all the speakers and panelists, let's give a round of applause. Thank you very much for your sharing, and thank you very much for all the advice, the learnings, etc. for today. We'll be back 30th of June. And with that, this part of the program is closed. I'm just going to explain something practical for the people that are staying online. I'm sharing a slide right now. So when I'm closing this central session, we're going to use what we call fluid spaces on AirMeet. You will see a button that basically says that you can go to hybrid networking. Just push it and it will look similar to what you see on the screen. The way it works is very similar to how you network in a conference center, meaning that if you move closer to somebody, then when you're close enough, you can start talking. And then when you prefer to talk to somebody else, for whatever reason, you just move away again. There's also different rooms in there that you can see at the bottom right side. So if you feel that maybe it's more interesting somewhere else, you just switch to another room. So that's how the networking is going to work. It's going to remain open for at least half an hour, but probably for an hour. So very much enjoy meeting each other. That's it for today. Thank you very much.